Ever go to the store and, like, the self-checkout line's a mile long? It's like, come on, are they trying to phase us out or something? And those chatbot customer service things? Ugh, don't get me started. It's enough to make you wonder if the robots are taking over, you know? Well, today we're diving into all of that automation, the future of work, the whole shebang. We're looking at Rise of the Robots by Martin Ford.
Yeah, it's a book that really holds up, even though it came out back in 2015.
Right, like scarily relevant to, well, right now.
Totally. And Ford knows his stuff.
Hmm.
He's been in tech for over 25 years. Software, running businesses, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
So he's seen firsthand how this stuff is playing out.
And he doesn't sugarcoat it.
Not at all. He says straight up, this isn't just some, like, blip on the radar.
Yeah.
Automation's changing how we work at a fundamental level.
It really makes you think, like, is any job safe?
Right. Like, we tend to think robots, oh, they'll take factory jobs, that's it. But Ford's like, hold my beer, this is coming for white-collar work, too.
Exactly. And he uses this example of agriculture. Like, back in the day, biggest employer around right now, super automated.
And his point is, that could happen to fields we think are safe now. Like, who knows what the future holds, right?
Yeah, and he has some crazy examples in the book. Like, remember when Amazon bought Kiva Systems?
Oh, yeah. Those warehouse robots. Yeah.
Analysts are saying they could cut fulfillment costs by something like 40%.
40%. That's insane.
And then there's Kroger, the grocery store. They've got these super high-tech distribution centers. Basically, robots do almost everything, unload the pallets, sort everything, repackage it for the stores.
Wow. Bet the unions weren't too happy about that.
I know, right? Less jobs for people to do. But get this, McDonald's. They've been messing around with robots since the 90s.
Seriously. Like, robot fry cooks.
Robot chefs, drink dispensers, everything. But back then, it was cheaper to just pay people minimum wage.
Makes sense.
But now, Ford's saying that's changing. Tech's getting cheaper, smarter. So using robots is starting to make more sense, even for those jobs.
Which is kind of terrifying when you think about it. Like, is any job safe?
Right. And that brings us to this whole skills gap thing. Like, everyone says, just get a better education. But Ford's like, hold on a sec.
Yeah, he talks about how the job market is, like, splitting into, he calls it job polarization.
Job polarization.
Yeah, like, imagine a barbell, right? All the weights at the ends. So you got tons of low-paying jobs and then a few super high-skill, high-paying ones. But even those might not be so safe in the long run, you know?
Just like what? You climb to the top of the ladder and the robots are already there?
Pretty much. And Ford throws down some stats like a bunch of college grads, even in STEM fields, they're having trouble finding jobs. It's like all that education, and for what?
Right. It's crazy.
And it's not just the number of jobs either. The whole nature of work is changing. Ford talks about how even really specialized, high-skill tasks are getting automated. Like, there's this company, Narrative Science, right? They've got this software, Quill. It actually writes news articles, financial reports, stuff like that, things that actual people used to do.
No way. So, like, journalists, financial analysts, they're out of luck.
It's a wake-up call, for sure. And then there's all those high-frequency trading algorithms. They've basically replaced stock traders on Wall Street, making decisions in milliseconds, way faster than any human could.
It's wild. It really makes you wonder, if we're all supposed to get these high-skilled jobs, what happens when robots can do those too?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
And it's not just some abstract problem either. It gets to the core of, like, how our economy works. If robots are doing all the jobs, who's buying all this stuff?
It's like this big economic puzzle. Jobs equal income, income equals people buying things, and buying things keeps the whole thing running, right?
Ford has this great analogy in the book. He compares it to a video game. You can win, rack up all the points, but then what? The game's over. So, what happens when robots don't need paychecks? And you can just make more of them whenever you want. Who's left to buy all this stuff?
It's especially interesting when you look at a country like China. They've built their economy on cheap labor, right? But Ford says that might backfire as automation gets more appealing, even in countries with low wages.
So, are we all doomed?
Well, not necessarily. Ford actually has some pretty interesting ideas about what we can do about all of this.
Okay, good, because I was starting to get a little worried there for a second.
Yeah, he's not all doom and gloom. He's more about, like, exploring the possibilities, both good and bad. And one of the most interesting ones is this idea of a universal basic income.
Oh yeah, UBI, I've heard about that. It's like everyone gets a paycheck, even if they don't have a traditional job.
Right. And it's not just some fringe idea either.
Yeah, I was surprised to learn that some pretty big names have supported it over the years.
Yeah, even like Friedrich Hayek, and he's like the godfather of free market economics.
Wow, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was all for a basic income guarantee. Back in the 70s, he said, in a society as rich as ours, a safety net isn't just a moral thing, it makes economic sense too.
Huh. Makes you think.
Right, it really gets you thinking differently about work and how we value it. Like, what would you do with an extra, say, $1,000 a month? Would you finally split that business idea you've been tossing around? Or learn a new skill?
Hmm.
Ford seems to think that giving people that kind of breathing room could be a good thing for the economy.
Yeah, it's not just about propping up the old system, it's about making space for something totally new, right?
Exactly. But UBI is just one piece of the puzzle. Ford also talks about taxing automation itself to pay for these kinds of social programs. Like,
Mhm.
if robots are going to be taking over jobs, shouldn't they be chipping in to support the system too?
Right. It's only fair.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But even beyond policy stuff, Ford challenges us to think differently about what work even means in our lives.
Hmm.
Like, if robots are doing all the heavy lifting, what does it even mean to live a fulfilling life? It's a pretty deep question when you think about it.
It is. Like, it makes you think, what would I do with all that free time?
Right. And that's where Ford goes even deeper. He starts looking at stuff like superintelligence, the singularity.
Well, on the singularity, that sounds intense.
It is. It's that hypothetical moment when artificial intelligence becomes smarter than us, humans. And then things get really unpredictable, really fast. It sounds like science fiction. But even people like Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk have said, we need to be careful about AI, about where it's all headed.
So it's like those movies where the robots become self-aware and decide, yeah, we don't really need humans anymore.
Haha. Yeah, exactly. But the point is, if we're creating machines that are potentially smarter than us, shouldn't we at least be thinking about the ethics of it all? Like how to make sure it turns out okay for us humans.
Right, right. Let's not get caught with our pants down when the robots come knocking, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But hey, it's not all doom and gloom. Ford also talks about some really cool emerging technologies like nanotech.
Nanotech, isn't that like manipulating stuff at the atomic level?
Yeah, like really, really small.
Is that even a real thing yet?
Oh yeah, it's already happening. Scientists are building these amazing materials with crazy properties. Ford says nanotech could even lead to a world where we've got like unlimited resources. We could just make whatever we need.
Whoa, whoa, hold on. So you're telling me we might be able to print a new pair of shoes with a 3D printer one day?
It's possible.
Or like build houses using tiny robots?
It's not as far-fetched as it sounds.
Hmm.
Of course, there are always downsides. Some experts are worried about what nanomaterials will do to the environment, or if those tiny robots might, start replicating out of control.
Okay, yeah, that last one does sound a bit like a horror movie, but at least Ford doesn't totally freak us out. He actually ends the book on a pretty hopeful note.
He does. He says that throughout history, humans have dealt with some pretty big changes. And we always find a way to adapt, like it's in our nature or something.
So what's the main takeaway here?
I think the big one is that the future of work, it's not set in stone. It's not like this thing that's just going to happen to us, and we have no control over it. We've got choices to make, both as individuals and as a society.
It's about deciding what kind of world we want to live in
Right.
and how technology fits into that.
Exactly. And I think Ford's book really shows that we have more power than we think. It's not about being afraid of the robots. It's about using technology to make a future that's better, fairer, and, more human for everyone.
Doom and gloom's no fun, right? So what's Ford's solution?
Well, he throws out this idea of a universal basic income, UBI.
Like everyone gets a paycheck no matter what.
Exactly, even if they don't have a traditional job.
Huh. That's a pretty radical idea.
It is, but it's been floating around for a while. And get this, even Friedrich Hayek, Mr. Free Market himself, he was a fan.
No way. Really?
Yeah. Back in the 70s, he said that in a super wealthy society like ours, giving everyone a basic income isn't just the right thing to do, it makes economic sense too.
Wow. It's like it really changes how you think about work. If everyone got a basic income, what would you do? Would you still work the same job?
Right. Would you start that business you've been dreaming about?
Hmm.
Ford seems to think that giving people that kind of financial cushion could actually be a huge boost for the economy. More people taking risks, trying new things.
Instead of being stuck, just trying to make ends meet.
Exactly. But UBI is just one idea. Ford also talks about, taxing automation itself.
Oh, interesting. So if the robots are taking the jobs, they should pay their fair share, right?
Like fund those social programs, help people transition to a new kind of economy.
It makes sense. So it's not all about like handouts. It's about creating a system that works, even with all this crazy tech changing everything.
Exactly. And even beyond policy, Ford makes this really thought-provoking point. He asks, if robots are doing all the work, what does it even mean to live a good life? Like, what would we do with all that free time?
Right. That's the big question, isn't it?
It is. And this is where Ford really goes deep. He starts talking about things like superintelligence, the singularity.
Hold on, the singularity. That sounds kind of scary.
It's definitely out there.
Yeah.
Basically, it's this idea that someday artificial intelligence will surpass human intelligence, and then who knows what happens. It's like things change so fast we can't even imagine it.
Like in those sci-fi movies where the robots take over?
Exactly. And it might sound crazy, but even really smart people like Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk,
Yeah.
they said we need to be careful about AI, make sure it doesn't get out of control.
It's like we're creating our own robot overlords or something.
Right. So we have to think about it now before it's too late. But hey, it's not all doom and gloom. Ford also talks about some really exciting tech, like nanotechnology.
Nanotech, like that's manipulating matter at the atomic level, right?
Yeah, super tiny stuff. And it's already happening. Scientists are creating these incredible materials with all kinds of crazy properties. Ford thinks nanotech could actually lead to a world of radical abundance, where we can basically create anything we need with almost no resources.
Hold up. Are you saying like we could just 3D print a new pair of shoes or build a house with tiny robots?
It might sound crazy, but it's not as far-fetched as you think. Of course, there are always downsides, like some people worry about nanomaterials harming the environment, or those tiny robots, multiplying like crazy and getting out of control.
Okay, yeah, that last one does sound a little too much like a sci-fi horror movie.
Haha, yeah. But the good news is, Ford doesn't leave us totally terrified. He actually ends the book on a pretty hopeful note.
Oh, good, because I was starting to get a little worried there.
He reminds us that humans have always been through big changes. The agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, we always adapt.
So what's the main thing we should take away from all of this?
The future isn't set in stone. It's not something that just happens to us. We have choices to make, as individuals and as a society.
It's about deciding what kind of world we want, right?
Exactly. And then figuring out how to use all this amazing technology to actually make that world a reality.
It's like we can't just like stick our heads in the sand and pretend it's not happening.
Exactly. We have to be proactive. And Ford talks a lot about education. Like, we need to totally rethink how we're preparing kids for this future.
Oh, absolutely, because the jobs they're going to be doing, they probably don't even exist yet, right?
Right. So it's not about teaching them specific things. It's about teaching them how to learn, how to adapt,
Yeah.
how to solve problems.
So like critical thinking skills.
Exactly. Being curious,
Yeah.
wanting to learn new things, that's going to be way more valuable than any particular fact they could memorize.
So like cultivating that love of learning so they can keep up, as things change faster and faster.
Exactly. And it's not just about individuals either. We need the right systems in place to support people through these changes.
Right. Like we can't just say, hey, the robots are here. Good luck.
Exactly. Ford talks about things like a stronger social safety net, universal health care.
And that UBI we were talking about.
Yep, all of that. It's about making sure that everyone benefits from these technological advances, not just a select few.
Right, right. So to kind of wrap things up here, what are some of the big takeaways from Rise of the Robots?
Well, I think the biggest one is that the future isn't set in stone. We're not just along for the ride. We have choices to make.
It's not like some robot apocalypse is inevitable.
No, not at all. We have more agency than we think. It's about deciding what kind of future we want. And then, actually working to create it.
So it's not about being afraid of technology. It's about using it to make things better.
Exactly. And that's what I love about Ford's book. It's a wake-up call, for sure, but it's also ultimately a hopeful message.
It's like, hey, let's be smart about this. Let's make sure the future works for everyone.
Exactly. Well said.
That's it for our deep dive into Rise of the Robots. Hopefully this has given everyone a lot to think about.
Definitely. It's a conversation that's just beginning.
And we'll be here to keep exploring these ideas with you. Thanks for listening, everyone.